On the day I moved cross-country for my dream job, my parents sent 47 texts demanding I cancel everything and stay home to run the family business or be written out of the will. For 26 years, I was the family workhorse. While my younger brother partied through college, I managed our parents' struggling hardware store every weekend, every holiday, every summer. When I finally got my dream job offer in Seattle, $95,000 salary plus relocation package, my parents demanded I decline it to keep the family business alive. When I boarded the plane anyway, my mother sent 47 texts threatening to disown me, cut me from the will, and tell everyone I abandoned them. What she didn't expect was that her threats would expose decades of financial exploitation, and that CPS would get involved when my teenage sister's situation came to light. This is my story. The text from my mother arrived at 6:17 a.m. while I was standing in the security line at Chicago O'Hare Airport, my carry-on bag at my feet, and my boarding pass clutched in my sweating hand. The first 3 words caused my stomach to drop through the floor. Family emergency meeting. I saw my girlfriend Megan's expression as she read over my shoulder. I watched her face morph from sleepy excitement about our new adventure to something harder, more guarded, the expression she always got when my family was involved. We had been together for 3 years, and she had learned to recognize the patterns. We were moving to Seattle, together. For the first time in my 26 years of life, I was leaving Illinois, leaving the orbit of my parents' expectations, leaving the hardware store that had consumed every weekend of my existence since I was 14 years old. My mother's next message arrived before I could fully process the first. Your father had chest pains last night. He's at the hospital. You need to come home immediately. The store can't run itself. Cancel your flight. Not are you okay, not we'll miss you, not good luck with your new job. Just commands, demands, expectations wrapped in the familiar language of family obligation that had shaped my entire life. I'd been the oldest of 3 children for 26 years, but I'd been functioning as a third business partner since the age of 14. That's when my parents decided that Pierce Family Hardware needed to be open on weekends to compete with the big box stores, and someone had to work the floor while they managed inventory and suppliers. That someone became me. I learned to operate a cash register before I learned to drive. I stocked shelves while my classmates went to football games. I handled customer complaints about defective products while my friends were at prom. Pierce Family Hardware wasn't just a business, it was my parents' identity, their legacy, their excuse for every sacrifice they demanded from their children. My younger brother Derek was 12 when the weekend shifts started, old enough to help but somehow never required to. He had soccer practice, then basketball, then a social life that my parents deemed essential to his development. My sister Kaylee was only 8, too young to work, and by the time she was old enough, the pattern had been set. Marcus runs the store on weekends. That's just how things work. My parents always praised me for being responsible, dependable, and mature. Teachers called me an old soul. Neighbors said I was wise beyond my years. No one ever questioned why a 14-year-old was working 20-hour weeks in a hardware store while maintaining honor roll grades, or why my parents seemed perfectly content to sacrifice my adolescence for their business margins. The pattern continued through high school. I couldn't join the debate team because tournaments were on Saturdays and the store needed coverage. I couldn't take the AP physics course because it required a lab period that conflicted with my afternoon shifts. I couldn't apply to out-of-state colleges because someone had to be available for emergencies, and my parents couldn't possibly handle the store alone. I was accepted to Northwestern with a partial scholarship, my dream school, 45 minutes from home but far enough to feel like freedom. My mother cried when I showed her the acceptance letter, but not from pride. How are we supposed to manage without you every weekend? She asked, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The store barely survives as it is. Northwestern is too far. You'd never make it home in time for Saturday morning shifts. So I went to the local state university instead, commuted from home, worked every weekend, every holiday, every summer, watched my friends post pictures from dorm parties and study abroad programs while I restocked PVC fittings and explained the difference between Phillips and flathead screwdrivers to confused homeowners. Derek, meanwhile, went to Arizona State on my parents' dime. Full support, no expectations, no weekend obligations. He majored in business, the irony was not lost on me, and graduated with a 2.7 GPA and 0 practical experience in actually running a business. When he came home for holidays, he'd work maybe one shift at the store before claiming exhaustion and retreating to his childhood bedroom to play video games. "Your brother needs to decompress," my mother would explain when I questioned the double standard. "College is stressful for him. He's not like you, Marcus. You've always been able to handle pressure." Translation: you're easier to exploit, so we'll keep exploiting you. I graduated with a degree in supply chain management, a field I'd chosen specifically because it might eventually give me skills to help the family business. I took a job at a logistics company 20 minutes from home, close enough to still work weekends at the store, of course, and spent the next 4 years building experience while my parents continued to treat me as their on-call employee. The breaking point came slowly, then all at once. I met Megan at a conference in Minneapolis. She was a project manager for a tech company, sharp and direct and completely unimpressed by family drama. We dated long distance for 8 months before she transferred to the Chicago office to be closer to me. When she finally met my parents, she was polite but observant. "How often do you actually work at that store?" she asked after our first family dinner, where my mother had spent 45 minutes complaining about how hard it was to find reliable weekend help. "Every Saturday, usually Sundays too," I admitted, "sometimes Friday evenings if they need coverage." Megan was quiet for a long moment. "And they pay you for this?" The question hit like a physical blow. I'd been working at Pierce Family Hardware for 12 years. I'd never received a regular paycheck. My parents called it helping the family and building your inheritance and learning the business you'll eventually own. They bought me gas money sometimes, covered my cell phone bill, let me live at home rent-free during college. But actual wages, a W-2, nothing. "It's family," I said weakly, knowing how hollow it sounded. "Family doesn't mean unpaid labor for over a decade," Megan replied. "That's exploitation. That's wage theft. That's your parents using their child as free staff while they paid your brother's out-of-state tuition." We spent months in couples counseling after that conversation, working through the patterns I'd internalized and the boundaries I'd never learned to set. Our therapist, Dr. Amanda Reeves, specialized in family systems and enmeshment. She used words I'd never heard before: parentification, emotional labor, coercive control, and slowly helped me understand that my childhood had not been normal. "Your parents assigned you an adult role before you were developmentally ready," Dr. Reeves explained during one session. "You became responsible for the family's economic survival at 14 years old. That's not character building. That's exploitation." The process was painful. I had to examine beliefs I'd held my entire life, that I was uniquely responsible for my family's well-being, that setting boundaries was selfish, that my worth was measured by my usefulness to others. Megan sat beside me through every session, holding my hand, validating the reality I'd been taught to deny. We set boundaries 6 months before the Seattle opportunity arose. I told my parents I would no longer work regular weekend shifts. I would help during genuine emergencies and peak seasons like Christmas, but I was no longer their on-call employee. I was 25 years old. It was time to have my own life. My mother cried for 3 hours. My father didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Derek called to say I was being selfish and abandoning the family, which was rich coming from someone who hadn't worked a shift at the store since high school graduation. My grandmother sent a letter, an actual handwritten letter, about the importance of family loyalty and how disappointed my late grandfather would be. But I held firm. Dr. Reeves had prepared me for the guilt trips, the silent treatment, the recruitment of extended family to pressure me back into compliance. "They will test your boundaries," she warned. "They will try every manipulation technique they've used successfully for years. Your job is to stay consistent. No justifying, no arguing, no defending, no explaining. Just repeat your boundary and disengage." It worked mostly. My parents eventually accepted that I wasn't available every weekend, though they complained constantly about having to hire part-time help. They found a retired contractor named Bill who worked Saturdays for actual money, and somehow the store survived without my free labor. Imagine that. Then came the Seattle offer. A major logistics company was opening a new regional hub in the Pacific Northwest. They were looking for experienced supply chain managers to build the operation from the ground up. The salary was $95,000, nearly double what I was making at my current job, plus a generous relocation package, stock options, and actual career advancement potential. I applied on a whim, expecting nothing. I got a phone interview, then a video interview, then then an in-person interview that required flying to Seattle on my own dime. I didn't tell my parents about any of it. I'd learned that sharing good news with them meant watching them find ways to diminish it or redirect the conversation to their own needs. The offer came on a Tuesday afternoon. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building and stared at the email for 20 minutes, reading and rereading the salary figure, the start date, the relocation assistance. This was everything I'd ever wanted: a fresh start, a real career, a life that wasn't centered around my parents' hardware store. I called Megan first. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "We're going to Seattle," she yelled. "Oh my God, Marcus, this is it. This is what we've been working toward. I can transfer to our Seattle office. I already checked, they have openings. We can finally start our actual lives." Her enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Not anxious, not obligated, not weighed down by expectations I'd never agreed to carry, just excited. I accepted the offer that evening. Start date, September 15th, 6 weeks away. Relocation assistance would cover our moving expenses, temporary housing, and one trip back to Chicago to settle affairs. Telling my parents was the hardest conversation of my life. I drove to their house on a Sunday evening, not a weekend I was scheduled to work. I'd made sure of that, and found them in the living room watching television. The store had closed at 5 p.m., and they looked tired in the way they always looked tired, as if running a small business was uniquely exhausting despite having extracted thousands of hours of free labor from their oldest son. "I have some news," I said, settling into the armchair across from the couch. "I've been offered a job in Seattle, a significant promotion, great salary, real career opportunity. I've accepted it. Megan and I are moving next month." The silence lasted approximately 4 seconds. My mother's face went through a rapid transformation: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally a tight, controlled expression I recognized from years of watching her manage difficult customers. "Seattle," she repeated flatly. "That's across the country." "It is," I agreed, "about 2,000 miles. And you just decided this without discussing it with us." "I discussed it with Megan. She's supportive. We're excited about this opportunity." My father, who had been silent until now, leaned forward with his hands clasped between his knees. "What about the store?" There it was, not congratulations, not "tell us about the job," not "we're proud of you." Just the store, always the store, the shrine they'd built their entire identities around and expected me to worship alongside them. "The store has Bill now," I said carefully, "and you could hire additional help. This isn't a sustainable model anyway, relying on family members to work for free. Other small businesses pay their employees." "Free?" My mother's voice rose sharply. "We've supported you your entire life. We paid for your college. We gave you a home. We taught you everything you know about business. And you call that free?" "You paid for Derek's out-of-state tuition," I replied, keeping my voice level despite my racing heart. "I went to community college and lived at home because you told me Northwestern was too far. You didn't teach me about business. You assigned me a job when I was 14 and expected me to perform it without compensation for 12 years. "Compensation," my father almost laughed. "This is family. Family doesn't bill each other for help. Help is occasional and voluntary. What you required from me was systematic, mandatory, and unpaid. There's a legal term for that, actually. It's called wage theft." The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother accused me of betrayal. My father questioned my loyalty. Both of them kept circling back to the store, to the family legacy, to the sacrifices they had supposedly made that I was now spitting on by daring to have my own career. I left after an hour, having achieved nothing except confirming that my decision was correct. These were not people who would ever celebrate my success unless it served their interests. They saw me as a resource to be managed, not a person to be supported. The following 6 weeks were a gauntlet of guilt trips and manipulation attempts. My mother called daily, sometimes multiple times, with various emergencies that required my immediate attention. "Bill called in sick, could I cover? A major shipment was delayed, could I help sort it out? Your father's blood pressure is up. The stress of you leaving is affecting his health." Each call was designed to pull me back, to remind me of my obligations, to make my departure as painful as possible. I held firm. Dr. Reeves coached me through the daily onslaught. They're grieving the loss of their control over you, she explained. This behavior will likely intensify as your departure date approaches. Stay consistent with your boundaries. Don't engage with guilt trips. Remember that their feelings are not your responsibility to manage. Derek called once, ostensibly to check in but really to deliver a message from our parents. They're really struggling with this, he said, as if I hadn't noticed. The store might not survive without you. Is this job really worth destroying the family? The job is worth building my own life, I replied. And the family isn't destroyed, you're all still here. You could help out, Derek. You have a business degree. You live 20 minutes away. He sputtered something about his demanding job and his social commitments, and how he wasn't good with customers the way I was. The excuses were familiar, rehearsed over years of avoiding responsibility while I shouldered it alone. I'm moving to Seattle, I told him. Whatever happens to the store is not my problem anymore. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in years. Kaylee, my 18-year-old sister, was the one family member who seemed genuinely happy for me. She was a senior in high school, planning to attend college the following fall, and she'd watched our family dynamics with the clear eyes of someone who had never been assigned the caretaker role. They're being ridiculous, she told me over coffee, one of the rare times we'd connected as siblings rather than as two people existing in the same household. You've given them so much. You deserve to have your own life. Are you going to be okay? I asked, suddenly worried. With me gone, would the pressure shift to her? She shrugged. I'm leaving for school next year anyway. I'm applying to places as far away as possible. I've seen what they did to you, Marcus. I'm not letting them do it to me. The morning of our flight, September 14th, I woke up at 4:30 a.m. with a mixture of excitement and dread. Megan and I had spent the previous week packing our apartment, saying goodbye to friends, and handling the 1,000 small tasks that accompany a cross-country move. Our belongings were in a moving truck heading west. We had one-way tickets to Seattle and a temporary apartment waiting for us near my new office. I'd told my parents our flight time and offered to have dinner with them the night before, a final goodbye before the move. My mother had declined, claiming she wasn't feeling well. My father hadn't responded at all. The message was clear. If I was going to abandon them, they would give me nothing to hold on to. We were in the security line at O'Hare when my phone started buzzing. The first message about a family emergency meeting was followed by a rapid succession of texts that made my vision blur with anger and something that felt uncomfortably close to panic. My mother wrote, "Your father is at the hospital. Chest pains. This is serious. Then I can't handle this alone. I need you here. Then the store needs to open in 3 hours. Bill can't come in today. There's no one else. Then if you get on that plane, you're choosing strangers over your family." Then I never thought my own son would abandon us in a crisis. The messages kept coming, each one more urgent and guilt-laden than the last. By the time we reached the TSA agent, I had received 27 texts, all variations on the same theme. Come home. Cancel your flight. The family needs you. Megan watched me read them, her expression cycling through concern and then settling into something harder. "Show me," she said quietly. I handed her my phone. She scrolled through the messages, her jaw tightening with each one. "This is manipulation," she said finally. "If your father were actually having a medical emergency, she wouldn't be texting you about the store. She'd be at the hospital, focused on him, not sending guilt trips about your flight." But what if it's real? The old programming kicked in, the decades of conditioning that made me responsible for every crisis, every problem, every need my parents couldn't be bothered to handle themselves. "Then they'll handle it like adults who have been married for 30 years and run a business together," Megan replied firmly. "Your father is 58 years old. If he's having chest pains, he's at a hospital with doctors. There is nothing you can do from Chicago that you couldn't do from Seattle. And the store," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The store can close for one day. The store can hire help. The store is not your responsibility anymore." I knew she was right. Every rational part of my brain understood that this was exactly the kind of escalation Dr. Reeves had warned me about, a manufactured crisis designed to test my boundaries and pull me back into the family system. But the irrational part, the part that had been trained for 26 years to drop everything when my parents called, that part was screaming at me to turn around, to catch a taxi home, to prove that I was still the reliable, responsible son they'd always counted on. I called my mother from the boarding area. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus, thank God, are you coming home?" "I'm at the airport," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What's happening with Dad?" "He had chest pains last night. We went to the emergency room. They're running tests." "What kind of tests? What are the doctors saying?" A pause, longer than there should be if this were a genuine emergency. "They're still figuring it out, but I need you here, Marcus. I can't do this alone." "What about the tests? Is it his heart? Did they mention a heart attack, angina, anything specific?" Another pause, they're being very thorough. You know how hospitals are. I recognized this pattern, vague on details, heavy on emotional appeals. If my father were actually having a cardiac event, my mother would know the terminology. She would have information from doctors. She wouldn't be spending her time at the hospital sending dozens of texts about the store. "Mom, I need you to be honest with me. Is this a real medical emergency, or is this about the store?" Her voice went cold. "How dare you? Your father is in the hospital, and you're interrogating me like I'm lying." "I'm asking because the texts you sent focused more on the store than on Dad's condition. I'm asking because you mentioned Bill can't work today in the same message where you supposedly told me Dad was having chest pains. I'm asking because this feels exactly like the manipulation Dr. Reeves warned me about." "Silence, then. That therapist has poisoned you against your own family." "That therapist helped me recognize that my family has been exploiting me for over a decade. Now, is Dad actually having a medical crisis, or is this about making me miss my flight?" More silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, flatter, more controlled, the mask slipping slightly. "Your father had some indigestion last night. We went to the ER as a precaution. They ran an EKG and some blood work. Everything was fine. They sent him home at 3 a.m. The relief that flooded through me was immediately replaced by white-hot anger. "So he's fine. He's home. There's no emergency." "The emergency is that you're abandoning us. The emergency is that the store needs someone to open it, and Bill called in sick, and your father is exhausted from being at the hospital all night. The emergency is that my son is choosing some job over his family." "Mom, I'm going to hang up now. I'm boarding a plane to Seattle. I will not be coming back to run the store. You need to hire help or close for the day. Those are your options." "If you get on that planes." "I'm getting on the planes." "You are no longer welcome in this family. Do you understand? You will be cut out. No inheritance, no relationship, nothing. You'll be dead to us." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I'd known this moment was coming. Dr. Reeves had predicted it. Megan had warned me, and some part of me had always understood that my parents would only accept me on their terms. But hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a physical blow. "I understand," I said quietly. "I'm sorry it's come to this. I hope Dad feels better. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Megan wrapped her arms around me and held on tight while I stood in the boarding area, surrounded by strangers, processing the fact that my mother had just disowned me for refusing to miss my flight. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." The texts continued throughout our flight. By the time we landed in Seattle 5 hours later, I had received 47 messages, the final count that would become burned into my memory. My mother's messages grew increasingly unhinged as the hours passed. She threatened to hire a lawyer to force me to return. She claimed I was legally obligated to work at the store due to some imaginary family contract. She said she would tell everyone in our extended family what I'd done, that she would make sure no one ever spoke to me again, that I would regret this decision for the rest of my life. My father sent a single message, "Very disappointed in you." That was it. 5 words that somehow managed to be more devastating than my mother's pages of threats and accusations. Derek weighed in around hour 3. "Dude, what the hell? Mom is losing her mind. Just come home and fix this." Even my grandmother, the sweet elderly woman who had sent cookies every Christmas and always told me how proud she was of her grandson, sent a message. "Your mother tells me you've abandoned the family. I raised you better than this, Marcus. I'm praying for your soul." The extended family started texting around hour 4. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely knew, all of them suddenly had strong opinions about my decision to move across the country for a job. My mother had clearly launched a coordinated campaign, spreading her version of events to anyone who would listen. My cousin Rachel, I can't believe you'd do this to Aunt Linda and Uncle John. Family is everything. My Uncle Mike, your father worked his whole life to build that store. You're spitting on his legacy. My Aunt Sandra, your mother is heartbroken. How could you be so selfish? The flying monkeys, Dr. Reeves called them, family members recruited to pressure you back into compliance. Seeing it happen in real time, watching my phone fill with accusations from people who had never worked a single shift at Pierce Family Hardware, was surreal. Megan and I sat in our temporary apartment that first night in Seattle, surrounded by rented furniture and the few personal items we'd carried on the plane, and I showed her the messages. "This is insane," she said, scrolling through the endless stream of texts. "These people have no idea what really happened. They're just repeating whatever your mom told them." She's good at that, I admitted. She's had years of practice controlling the narrative. I'm always the ungrateful one, the selfish one, the one who doesn't appreciate everything they've done for me. "You need to document all of this," Megan said firmly. "Screenshots, dates, everything. If they're threatening legal action or making false statements about you, you might need evidence." I spent the next 2 hours systematically capturing every message, organizing them by sender and timestamp. Dr. Reeves had given me similar advice months ago. Document everything, even if you hope you'll never need it. The documentation became a project that kept me grounded during the chaos of the following weeks. While Megan and I settled into our temporary housing, while I started my new job and she transferred to her company's Seattle office, while we searched for a permanent apartment and tried to build our new life, my phone continued to be a portal to the dysfunction I'd left behind. The harassment didn't stop after we landed. If anything, it intensified. My mother called my new employer 3 days after I started. She somehow found the main number, asked for human resources, and told them that I had abandoned my family during a medical emergency and was an unreliable employee who couldn't be trusted. I know this because my new boss, a woman named Patricia Chen, called me into her office on my 3rd day to discuss a concerning phone call. My heart stopped. I was convinced I was about to be fired before I'd even really started, that my mother had succeeded in destroying this opportunity before it could flourish. But Patricia's expression was more curious than concerned. "I received a call from someone claiming to be your mother," she said. "She had some very specific complaints about your character and reliability. She suggested I reconsider your hiring." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I can explain." Patricia held up a hand. "You don't need to explain. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I know what a reference check looks like, and I know what harassment looks like. That call was harassment." She paused. "I wanted to let you know it happened and to tell you that it has no bearing on your employment here. Your interview was excellent, your references from your previous employer were stellar, and your work so far has been impressive. Whatever is happening with your family is your personal business, not ours." The relief was overwhelming. "Thank you," I managed. "I'm so sorry she did that." "Don't apologize for other people's behavior," Patricia said firmly. "But you might want to consult a lawyer about boundaries and harassment. If she's willing to call your employer, she might try other things." I took Patricia's advice. I found a family law attorney in Seattle named David Okonkwo who specialized in exactly these kinds of situations, toxic family dynamics that crossed into legal harassment territory. "What your mother did could be considered tortious interference with business relations," David explained during our consultation. "She deliberately contacted your employer with the intent to damage your employment. That's actionable." "I don't want to sue my mother," I said immediately. "I just want her to stop." "A cease and desist letter might accomplish that," David suggested. "It's a formal legal document that puts her on notice. Stop the harassment, stop the contact, stop recruiting others to contact you, or face legal consequences. Most people back down when they realize there are actual repercussions for their behavior." He also recommended documenting everything, keeping records of every message and contact attempt, and considering a formal no-contact order if the behavior continued. I authorized the cease and desist letter. It was sent to my parents' home address via certified mail, requiring a signature upon delivery. The response was immediate and explosive. My mother called 17 times the day she received the letter. When I didn't answer, she left voicemails ranging from sobbing apologies to screaming threats. "How could you send lawyers after your own mother?" she wailed in one message. "This is your father and me you're threatening. We raised you. We gave you everything." In another, "If you think a piece of paper is going to stop me from fighting for my family, you don't know me at all. I will not be silenced by lawyers." My father called once, his voice flat and cold. "You've gone too far now. There's no coming back from this." The flying monkeys mobilized again, this time with even more intensity. Family members who had previously only sent disapproving texts now left angry voicemails. My grandmother called me a disgrace to the family name. My uncle Mike threatened to have a talk with me next time I was in Chicago, his tone implying that the talk might not be verbal. But here's the thing about legal consequences: they work. After the initial explosion of outrage, the direct contact from my parents tapered off significantly. They were still recruiting others to harass me, still spreading stories about how I'd abandoned them and hired lawyers to bully them into silence, but they stopped calling me directly. The indirect harassment was harder to stop. My mother apparently had an unlimited supply of flying monkeys willing to do her bidding. Kaylee called me 3 weeks after I moved, her voice tight and scared. "Mom and Dad are being really weird," she said. "They keep talking about how you betrayed them, how you're dead to the family now. They've taken down all your pictures. They removed your name from the emergency contact forms at the store." "I'm so sorry you're caught in the middle of this," I told her. "That's not why I'm calling." She paused. "They're starting to talk about me the same way they used to talk about you, about how I need to step up now that you're gone, about how the family needs me. I'm supposed to go to college next year, but Mom keeps saying they can't afford it if I don't help at the store, and I don't know what to do." My stomach dropped. I'd worried about this exact scenario. With me gone, would they transfer their expectations to Kaylee? "Listen to me," I said firmly. "You are not responsible for the family business. You are not responsible for their inability to hire help or manage their own store. You deserve to go to college, to have your own life, to make your own choices. Whatever they're telling you, it's manipulation. It's the same thing they did to me for 12 years. But I can't just leave like you did. I don't have anywhere to go. You will in a year apply to schools far away, get scholarships, make your escape plan now while you still have time, and Kaylee, document everything. Write down what they say when they say it. If things get bad, you might need that evidence." The call ended with me feeling sick. I'd escaped, but I'd left my little sister behind in a household that was clearly escalating its dysfunction. I shared my concerns with Megan that evening. "They're going to do to Kaylee what they did to me," I said. "Maybe worse, because they're angry and looking for someone to replace me." "Can we help her?" Megan asked. "Not directly, not while she's still a minor living in their house. But I can be available for her. I can give her guidance. I can make sure she knows that what's happening isn't normal." Over the following months, I became Kaylee's confidant. She'd text me updates about what was happening at home, the increasing pressure, the guilt trips, the arguments when she mentioned college plans that didn't involve staying local. My parents were clearly following the same playbook they'd used on me, just more aggressively because they were desperate. The real crisis came in November, 2 months after I'd moved. Kaylee called me in tears. "Mom wants me to drop out of school," she said, her voice breaking. "She says I need to work at the store full-time until Derek can help out more, which we both know means never. She says I can get my GED later. She says family comes first." "You're 18, I reminded her. "You're a legal adult. She can't make you drop out of school." "But she says if I don't, they're cutting me off. No car, no phone, no college money, nothing. Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at Megan, who had been listening to my half of the conversation. She nodded once, firmly. "You can come here," I said, "to Seattle. You can live with us, finish your senior year at a school here, and apply to colleges without their pressure. Megan and I have space. We'll figure out the details." I can't just leave." "Why not? What's keeping you there? Parents who see you as free labor, a brother who's never helped with anything, a store that isn't your responsibility." The silence stretched. When Kaylee spoke again, her voice was smaller but steadier. "How would I even do that?" First, we make a plan. You start gathering your important documents, birth certificate, social security card, any legal paperwork. You research how to transfer schools. You pack a bag with essentials, things you can't replace. Then, when you're ready, you get on a plane and you come here. We spent the next 3 weeks planning Kaylee's escape. It felt dramatic to call it that, but given my parents' behavior, I wasn't sure what else to call it. She was 18, legally an adult, but she was also emotionally and financially dependent on parents who were trying to trap her in the same cycle of exploitation that had consumed my adolescence. The day she left was December 3rd. She told our parents she was spending the night at a friend's house to work on a school project. Instead, she took an Uber to O'Hare and boarded a plane to Seattle with a suitcase full of clothes and a folder of important documents. My parents didn't realize she was gone until the next morning when she didn't come home from her friend's house. The text started around 10 a.m. Central Time. "My mother, where is your sister?" Then Kaylee won't answer her phone. Do you know where she is? Then, when Kaylee finally sent them a message explaining that she'd moved to Seattle, "What have you done to our daughter?" The fallout was spectacular. My mother accused me of kidnapping, apparently forgetting that Kaylee was 18 years old and had made her own decision. My father threatened to call the police. Derek sent a long, rambling text about how I was tearing the family apart and turning everyone against our parents. I responded to none of it. Neither did Kaylee. We'd agreed in advance that engaging with their hysteria would only fuel it. What I hadn't anticipated was that my parents would actually follow through on their threat to involve the police. 2 days after Kaylee arrived in Seattle, I received a call from the Chicago Police Department. An officer named Torres explained that my parents had filed a missing persons report for their daughter, claiming she'd been abducted by her brother and taken across state lines. "Sir, I'm calling to verify some information," Officer Torres said. "Your parents claim that Kaylee Pierce, age 18, was taken from their home against her will. They're requesting we contact Seattle Police to conduct a welfare check." "Officer Torres, Kaylee is 18 years old. She left voluntarily. She's sitting right here with me and is happy to confirm that." I handed the phone to Kaylee, who calmly explained to the officer that she had chosen to leave home, was not being held against her will, and did not want to return to her parents' house. She provided her contact information and agreed to follow up with any additional verification they needed. Officer Torres sounded almost amused by the end of the call. "This happens more often than you'd think," he told me after Kaylee handed the phone back. "Parents don't want to accept that their adult children have made their own choices. I'll close this report as unfounded." But the incident rattled me. My parents had tried to weaponize law enforcement against us. What else were they capable of? I called David Okonkwo that afternoon and explained the situation. "They filed a false police report," I said. "That has to be illegal." "It can be depending on the circumstances," David replied. "Filing a false report is a crime in most jurisdictions. However, proving that they knew the report was false, rather than genuinely believing their daughter was abducted, can be difficult. Your mother might claim she was confused or scared or genuinely thought Kaylee was being controlled by you. So they just get away with it." "Not necessarily. If they continue this pattern, using official channels to harass you, making false accusations, trying to damage your reputation, you may have grounds for a restraining order or civil action. Keep documenting everything." The documentation continued to pile up. Every text, every voicemail, every flying monkey message, every incident where my parents tried to contact us through official channels. I created a spreadsheet tracking dates, times, and content. Megan suggested I back everything up to cloud storage in case something happened to my phone. Christmas that year was quiet and strange. Megan and I had Kaylee with us, which was wonderful, but the absence of family traditions, however dysfunctional, left an odd void. I found myself thinking about holidays past, the chaotic dinners at my parents' house, the arguments about who would work which shifts at the store during the Christmas rush. I didn't miss it, but I mourned what it should have been. Kaylee thrived in Seattle. She enrolled in a local high school, made friends quickly, and started planning for college with genuine excitement instead of dread. She told me one evening that she felt like she could finally breathe, like a weight she'd carried her whole life had been lifted. "I never realized how tense I was all the time," she said. living in that house, waiting for the next demand, the next guilt trip, the next crisis that somehow became my responsibility. Here, I just get to be myself. I understood exactly what she meant. The spring brought unexpected developments. I received a call from an unknown Chicago number that I almost didn't answer. When I picked up, a professional female voice identified herself as Tracy Sandoval from the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Mr. Pierce, I'm calling regarding a report we received about your parents' household. Your name was provided as a family contact. My heart rate spiked. What kind of report? I can't share details about an ongoing investigation, but I wanted to verify some information. You have a younger sister named Kaylee who previously lived in the household, correct? Correct, she's 18 now and lives with me in Seattle. And you also have a younger brother named Derek who is, I heard papers shuffling, 23 years old. That's right, he has his own apartment, but he's local to Chicago. Tracy was quiet for a moment. Mr. Pierce, I'm going to be direct with you because your contact information suggests you have relevant knowledge about family dynamics in the Pierce household. A report was filed expressing concern about potential neglect and exploitation of minors in a family business setting. The details matched patterns we sometimes see in cases of child labor violations. I nearly dropped the phone. Someone filed a report about my parents. I can't confirm who filed it. However, during our preliminary investigation, we've gathered information that raises questions about your family's business practices and the roles that minor children may have played in operating the family store. The irony was almost too much. Years after I'd aged out of protection, years after the damage had been done, someone had finally noticed what my parents had been doing. How can I help? I asked. Would you be willing to provide information about your own experiences? Any documentation you have about hours worked, compensation, or lack thereof, age when you began working. We understand this is a sensitive request, but your perspective could be valuable. I agreed immediately. I had years of evidence, old school calendars showing my work schedule, photos from the store where I was clearly a child operating the register, birthday cards from relatives that referenced little Marcus helping at the shop. I'd never thought of it as evidence before. I just thought of it as my life. The DCFS investigation unfolded over several months. I provided my documentation and spoke with investigators multiple times. Kaylee gave a separate statement about her experiences and the pressure she'd faced before leaving. Derek, surprisingly, also cooperated. Apparently, my parents' treatment had begun affecting him too once I was no longer available to absorb all their demands. The investigators seemed particularly interested in the financial aspects. The thousands of hours of unpaid labor, the way my parents had structured their expectations, the lack of any formal employment relationship that would have triggered minimum wage requirements and labor law protections. What you're describing, one investigator told me, is a pattern we see in family business exploitation cases. Parents use their children's labor while framing it as helping out or learning the business. The children don't realize until much later that what happened to them wasn't normal and often wasn't legal. The investigation concluded in May with findings that substantiated concerns about historical exploitation and current business practices. My parents were required to undergo remedial education about child labor laws and proper business operations. The store was audited for compliance with employment regulations. More importantly, the investigation created a formal record of what had happened. Documentation that validated what I'd always known but been told to doubt. My parents had used me, and my childhood had been stolen for their business. My parents' response to the DCFS investigation was predictable. They blamed me. The flying monkeys returned with renewed fury. Family members I hadn't heard from in months suddenly had opinions about how I'd sixed the government on my own parents. My grandmother left a voicemail calling me evil and saying my grandfather would be rolling in his grave. Derek, who had initially cooperated with investigators, apparently changed his tune under parental pressure and began texting me about family loyalty and forgiveness. I didn't respond to any of it. I'd learned that engagement only prolonged the conflict. But something shifted after the investigation. The harassment became less frequent. The flying monkeys seemed to lose energy. My mother's texts, which had been daily at the height of the conflict, dwindled to occasional messages on holidays, generic well-wishes that felt more like performance for any audience she imagined was watching than genuine attempts at connection. The cease and desist letter, the police report that backfired, the DCFS investigation, all of it had apparently taught my parents that their behavior had consequences. They hadn't changed their beliefs, as far as I could tell, but they'd changed their tactics. They'd retreated into martyrdom, telling anyone who would listen about their ungrateful children who had abandoned them, while avoiding direct confrontation that might trigger more legal involvement. It's been 3 years since I moved to Seattle, 3 years since I boarded that plane, while my mother sent 47 texts threatening to disown me. I got promoted twice at my company. Megan and I bought a house in a neighborhood we love. We got married last spring, a small ceremony with close friends and the few family members who hadn't turned against us. Kaylee was my best woman. She's a sophomore at the University of Washington now, studying psychology with a focus on family systems and trauma. She wants to help people who have been through what we experienced. Derek calls occasionally. He's still in Chicago, still loosely orbiting my parents, but he's started setting his own boundaries. He doesn't work at the store anymore. They finally hired actual employees after the DCFS scrutiny made them nervous about legal liability. He talks about visiting Seattle sometimes, though he hasn't made the trip yet. My parents and I haven't spoken in 2 years. They send Christmas cards with generic messages and no return address, as if they're fulfilling an obligation without actually wanting to reconnect. I don't respond. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever reconcile. Dr. Reeves helped me understand that reconciliation requires accountability, and my parents have shown no sign of accepting responsibility for their behavior. They still see themselves as victims of ungrateful children, of government overreach, of a world that doesn't appreciate their sacrifices. But I've stopped waiting for them to change. I've stopped hoping for the apology that will never come. I've accepted that some relationships cannot be fixed, only survived. What I have now is peace, real, sustainable peace. I wake up in a home I chose, next to a partner who respects me, in a city where my past doesn't define my present. My worth isn't measured by my usefulness to others. My time belongs to me. Kaylee sent me a letter last month, not a text, an actual handwritten letter. She does that sometimes, says it feels more meaningful than electronic communication. Dear Marcus, it began. I've been thinking a lot about what happened to us. In my psychology classes, we talk about family systems and intergenerational trauma and all these clinical terms for what we lived through. Sometimes it feels abstract, like we're studying a textbook case. Then I remember that the textbook case is our life. She went on to thank me for showing her that escape was possible, for giving her a safe place to land, for refusing to let our parents' manipulation succeed. You broke the cycle, she wrote. You chose yourself, and in doing so, you gave me permission to choose myself too. I don't know if Mom and Dad will ever understand what they did to us. I'm not sure it matters anymore. What matters is that we're free. We get to decide who we want to be. We get to build lives that aren't shaped by their expectations. She signed it, Love, your grateful little sister. I read that letter 3 times. I keep it in my desk drawer, next to the documentation folder I hope I never need to use again. My parents expected me to cancel my move to Seattle to run their hardware store. When I refused, they threatened to disown me, weaponized my siblings, recruited flying monkeys, filed false police reports, and accidentally triggered a DCFS investigation that exposed years of exploitation. They lost their free labor, lost relationships with most of their children, lost their reputation in the extended family, though they don't see it that way, lost their oldest son permanently. And according to Kaylee, who still gets updates from Derek, they continue to blame everyone but themselves. The therapist who poisoned me, the girlfriend, now wife, who stole me, the government agencies that persecuted them, the ungrateful children who didn't appreciate their sacrifices. It must be exhausting to be the victim of everyone else's malice, to never examine your own behavior, to push away everyone who loves you rather than acknowledge that you might have done something wrong. I used to feel sorry for them. Part of me still does, I suppose. They're getting older, more isolated, increasingly dependent on a store that barely survives despite their lifetime of effort. They'll probably die believing they did everything right and the world treated them unfairly. But that's their choice, and I've made mine. The truth is devastatingly simple. I wasn't supposed to be their employee. I was supposed to be their son, a family member with appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. When I finally stopped being their unpaid labor, the exploitation they'd built their lives around collapsed. That is not my failure, that is theirs. And I am free, finally, completely, and permanently free. The phone that used to buzz constantly with demands and guilt trips now holds pictures of my wife, my home, my life. The anxiety that used to grip me every time I heard my mother's ringtone has faded into memory. The person I'm becoming isn't shaped by their expectations, it's shaped by my choices. That's what they never understood, choice, the idea that I might want something different than what they'd planned for me, that my life might have meaning beyond servicing their business. They thought they were building a family legacy. What they actually built was a system of control that only worked as long as the controlled person didn't realize they could leave. I realized I left, and I took my sister with me. The legacy they're left with, an empty store, estranged children, and the bitter certainty that everyone else is to blame for their loneliness. I'll take Seattle. I'll take my wife, my career, my peace. I'll take the life I built when no one was willing to give me permission. I'll take freedom because that's what I chose.